African Union leaders meet in Addis Ababa to discuss reform of the continental body, including African integration and anti-corruption. The Russia probe and immigration reform overshadow Tuesday's State of the Union address by U.S. President Donald Trump. And why were stars wearing white roses on the Grammy Awards red carpet? We'll explain. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. African Union leaders gathered in Ethiopia Monday for the second and final day of the 30th AU Summit. Many issues affecting the continent and the world at large were discussed, including the Free Trade Area Initiative, which was launched today. VOA's BMJ Maritha reports from Addis Ababa.
It has been a busy last day here in Addis Ababa as heads of state and government from about 55 African countries wrapped up the 30th African Union Summit, which has been running since Monday last week. Key among the issues that have taken center stage is fighting corruption, which was the theme of the year, institutional reforms within the African Union, the opening of airspace among Africans, as well as opening of borders to enable Africans to move freely from one country to another. But a letter written by U.S. President Donald Trump and addressed to the African Union was also a subject for discussion, with some here, like the Tanzanian Foreign Minister Augustine Mahiga, saying that it was a way of showing remorse after allegations that Mr. Trump used unbecoming language towards African immigrants. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was among the people who spoke here and who hailed the partnership between Africa and the UN, besides promising more resources to the continental body to assist in curbing radicalization and terrorism.
Nothing justifies terrorism. No cause or grievance can ever excuse the indiscriminate target of civilians, the destruction of lives and livelihoods, and the creation of panic for its own sake.
The general feeling here after a week or so of deliberations in this building behind me is that there has been a lot of talk and very little action to back it up. Many people that I have spoken to are of the opinion that it is high time that these African leaders started taking action rather than just talking.
Now for more on the Africa Union Summit, BMJ Maritha, VOA Swahili reporter, joins me by phone from Addis Ababa. Good evening, BMJ.
Good evening, Vincent.
Now, talking about the Africa Union being something more than just a talk shop, to what extent have the leaders addressed the real big issue, which was the theme of this summit, corruption, fighting corruption among themselves, among the African countries?
Well, Vincent, just as I mentioned earlier there in that piece, it's been when President Buhari of Nigeria was speaking yesterday during the launch of the theme, you could actually have heard a pin drop because it was like the leaders were looking at each other as they spoke, and they spoke very well. Now, the irony of the matter is that Nigeria is one of the nations that are mentioned with not doing very well in this area. Now, Buhari listed these priorities in the campaign against corruption. He said that AU must organize African youth congresses against corruption so that they sensitize them in the fight against that vice, and again also mobilizing AU member states to implement the extra legal framework on corruption. And he said that there have been frameworks which everyone knows, but they don't seem to be working. But, and therefore, it put about three issues that they say that they are going to focus on.
Now, BMJ, the elephant in the house was actually in the house. The African leaders are accused, they themselves, of actually being part of the corruption, of facilitating corruption. Did that come up? Did they talk about owning up to the fact that they play a role?
No, the language used here, Vincent, was very diplomatic, and it was like nobody was pointing a finger at any other, the other leaders. For instance, there is the issue of Kenya, which the president of Kenya himself has owned up, saying that he may not be able to manage the rampant corruption in his government. And, Uhuru Kenyatta, the president of Kenya, was there, and he sat on, and nobody was really, looking at him or anything like that. Even South African leaders were there, and they did not tackle the problem head on. But it's expected that maybe this time around, because of the importance that they seem to have given this theme in this year's summit, something might be done that will be different from the way it was done before.
Well, indeed, a big issue, and an issue that requires so much action. We hope to see some positive results in the coming years. BMJ, thank you very much for reporting. BMJ Murithi is a VOA Swahili reporter coming to us live from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Now, government officials say a Somali military commander and 3 of his bodyguards were killed following an Al-Shabaab ambush near the village of Lug Habari, about 200 kilometers southwest of Mogadishu. Lieutenant Colonel Abdrahim Osman Abrone was leading a convoy of military vehicles when the militants attacked using rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns just before 12 p.m. local time on Monday. A regional lawmaker told VOA sources say Lieutenant Colonel Abrone was badly wounded and was captured by the militants who executed him. Now, in East Africa, Somalia has been the scene of widespread hunger in recent years because of a combination of lack of rain, its government inability to fully respond to the situation, and insurgency that has disrupted normal life. A new UN report forecasts the dire situation expected over the next 6 months. VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young has more.
If only it rained enough to raise food crops and sustain livestock. But Somalia's 5 successive droughts in recent years have combined with other factors to continue to put huge numbers of Somalia's nearly 15 million people at dire risk of food insecurity in coming months. That's the essence of a UN Food and Agriculture report released January 29. Via Skype from Mogadishu, the human impact is set forth by UN Food and Agriculture Organization official Daniel Molla.
We estimate 502,000 people will be facing emergency, and an additional 2.2 million people will face crisis. 2.7 million people in total, that is, will be in need of urgent humanitarian assistance between February and June 2018.
Hunger is defined by governments and NGOs in a 5-tier system. The 3rd tier is the crisis phase. The 4th is called the emergency level. Actual famine, the absence of food, is level 5. Southern Somalia experienced full-on famine in 2011 when the region was torn apart by violence from the Islamist terrorist group Al-Shabaab, which deliberately blocked outside relief and food shipments in order to control the population. The 2011 Somalia famine took more than 250,000 lives. Today, the main problem is not insurgency, it's food accessibility, determined by economics. If crops don't grow and livestock survive to be sold in the market, people do not have enough money to buy food, a large amount of which has to be imported to Somalia. That's discussed via Skype from Nairobi by NGO Oxfam official Stefan Arnold.
There is food in the country, market systems are working, traders are present who can import the food, but those who are hungry do not have the economic means to pay for this food. And it is clear that traders cannot afford either to give away food for free.
Oxfam's Arnold says that is why his and other relief NGOs are providing both food and direct cash assistance to Somalis so that they have the means to buy their supplies. The UN FAO's Daniel Molla says Somalia needs to better utilize its 2 main rivers so that a steadier water supply can expand agriculture and reduce food insecurity.
Somalia doesn't yet have the infrastructure to manage these two main rivers properly so that the risk of flooding is reduced, and also the water can be used to irrigate more land than is currently the case.
Building infrastructure takes time. Time a number of Somalis may not have left. Jeffrey Young, VOA News, Washington.
7 years after crowds demonstrated in Cairo to oust long-term leader Hosni Mubarak in what became one of the most visible flashpoints of the Arab Spring, Egypt is bracing for presidential elections in March that will serve as a test of what the country gained and lost as a result of those turbulent days of early 2011. Edward Iranian reports from Cairo.
Egyptians clamored for change in January 2011, and they got it. 7 years later, reality has made for a somber outlook. But analysts say some things have changed for the better.
There is a lot of criticism of the president, of officials, which never happened, for example, 50 or 60 years ago under Nasser. So Egypt is progressing, and but don't compare it to whatever happened in countries that took them civil wars and centuries to develop their democracy.
Unlike Syria and Libya, Egypt avoided a civil war with the military steering away from violence, but at the same time clamping down on new freedoms. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was elected president in 2014, replacing Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. Now al-Sisi wants another term. Some voters are apathetic, others unhappy, but some want him to stay.
He is rebuilding the Egyptian army, he is rebuilding the Egyptian economy, infrastructure, he is tackling a lot of difficult issues like the population explosion.
But Egypt is polarized, with Islamists angry at al-Sisi for overthrowing the Muslim Brotherhood. Liberal voters lament the loss of some freedoms. Most believe Egypt still needs to recover from the Arab Spring.
But there are sensitivities around sovereignty, and there's more of a feeling of nationalism than in many countries in the Middle East, because this is, of course, a very old land with an ancient civilization. There's a sense of wounded nationalism, a sense that the country is behind where it deserves to be economically and politically.
Al-Sisi faces a weak opposition and is widely favored to win re-election.
The existing government wants to ensure that Sisi is re-elected, but they also have a public that wants to believe that Egypt is a democracy after all the political costs they have paid since 2011 for that.
No one expects a perfect election, but analysts say it still shows how far Egypt has come in the stormy years since Tahrir Square. Edward Iranian for VOA News, Cairo.
Young gang members in Ivory Coast are getting a chance to change their lives thanks to a military-style re-socialization program. VOA's Faith Lapidus has the details.
Violent crime is down in many of the poorer neighborhoods of Abidjan, where gangs of teens as young as 12 roam the streets. Often not in school, the children are easy prey for adults looking to use them to commit crimes.
Mais je vais, je les approche. Pourquoi tu prends ça? Il me dit, maman, parce qu'il n'y a pas de travail. Et puis, bon, mes parents ne sont pas gentils avec moi, et puis c'est comme ça.
These teens are no longer terrorizing their neighbors. They've completed a 6-month boot camp at the Wukukro Resocialization Center. The program, set up by the National Security Council, teaches the young offenders military-style discipline and trades like tailoring and auto mechanics that should help them re-enter society with useful skills. At the center, they get off drugs and have a chance to redeem themselves.
Et suite à cette désintoxication-là, ils sont plus aptes à suivre tout ce qui est cours de rééducation, notamment de civisme, citoyenneté, droits de l'homme, savoir-être, savoir-vivre, qui leur permettent véritablement de comprendre comment ils doivent mieux se comporter en société.
Since it began in late 2016, 774 young men have completed the program and returned to Abidjan. Some now work in this tailor shop.
The government sent those children off to the resocialization camp and trained them. We really see the results.
Parents waiting to take their children home hope to see results too.
My child did some stupid things, but the main thing he did to end up here is because he disobeyed me.
We send him here for correction so that he becomes wiser.
For graduates, the classes, therapy sessions, and job training have made a difference.
I've learned a lot of things that you need to do in life and that you should not. During my stay here, I've really learned a lot of things. What I can say is that by God's grace, things will get better.
With the program's help finding work in apprenticeships or continuing their education, the graduates and their community will have that second chance. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, immigration tops the list of issues for U.S. President Donald Trump's first State of the Union address. Stay with us. Welcome back. The international community observed Holocaust Remembrance Day on Saturday by recalling the horrors committed during World War II by Nazi Germany and the bravery of those who risked their lives to save persecuted Jews and others from Nazi death camps. In this report by VOA's Ukrainian service, we learn about the amazing story of a Jewish boy who was saved by a Ukrainian family and grew up to be a Nobel laureate in chemistry.
Roald Hoffmann was born to the family of engineer Hillel Safran and his wife Clara, a teacher, in 1937. After his town was occupied by German troops, the young family was sent to a concentration camp. In January 1943, Clara escaped from the camp with her son and found shelter in the attic of a nearby village school.
I was 5.5 years old when I went into the attic, and I was 7 years old when I left.
Together with 3 other family members, Clara and Roald hid in the attic for 15 months.
I remember looking out at the children playing in the yard during recess. They were free. I was envious. I could not go out. But I was a quiet child.
The school's teacher, Mykola Duke, lived in the school building with his wife Maria and their 3 children.
They hid 5 people in the attic of their schoolhouse. 5 people. It's not just one person. And they did this at incredible risk to their life.
After the war, Clara and her son became itinerant refugees in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Germany. After remarrying and assuming a new last name, Hoffmann, Clara and her child resettled in the United States. A bright student, Roald did very well in school and went on to Columbia University and later to Harvard, where he got his PhD. In 1981, at the age of 44, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry.
I knew that I had done work that was sufficiently good for the Nobel Prize almost a year or 2 after we did the work. I did that work when I was very young, 27, 28. But it was still a surprise. I immediately rushed in and called my mother because I knew the telephone would ring. I was very close to my mother. She died 10 years ago.
Hoffmann spent his entire career teaching at Cornell University.
His work has spanned the entire field from organic chemistry to inorganic chemistry to organometallic chemistry.
At the height of his scientific career, Hoffman turned to poetry and drama. His latest play is about a Jewish family saved by a Ukrainian family during World War II. Just like in the play, the Hoffmans maintain a relationship with the family that saved their own.
I am very happy to have been born in the Ukraine. If I had remained, it could be that I would be a very good psychiatrist in Lviv. It was not my fate. I am here. I'm not unhappy. I have had a good career. I have a good family. I am happy. I am eternally grateful to the Duke family because I wouldn't be here if it were not for the good deeds of Mykola and Maria Duke.
Tetiana Ворожко, VOA News, Washington.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump is set to deliver his first State of the Union address on Tuesday against the backdrop of the Russia investigation and intensive negotiations on immigration reform. VOA's Michael Bowman reports from Washington.
Last year was eager to fire Russia investigation special counsel Robert Mueller overshadowed Trump's trip to Davos, Switzerland.
Fake news, folks. Fake news. What's your message today? Typical New York Times fake stories.
And is sparking renewed calls for legislation to protect Mueller from any presidential order dismissing him.
If this president decides to move against that special counsel, it could erode the rule of law in this country in a way that would be a devastating blow.
Some Republican lawmakers agree.
I think Mr. Mueller is the perfect guy to get to the bottom of all this, and he will. And I think my job, among others, is to give him the space to do it. I intend to do that. I've got legislation protecting Mr. Mueller, and I'll be glad to pass it tomorrow.
Graham has been at the center of bipartisan negotiations on immigration, including the fate of hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants brought to America as children who could be at risk of deportation in March.
There's so much interest in fixing this problem. The president's made a credible proposal. We're going to get there. We're going to give a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million dreamers who have been well vetted. We're going to do something substantial on the border.
The administration wants to enhance barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border and to reform legal immigration.
The president is determined to finally build a wall at the southern border, and a central idea of the president's reform proposal is switching to a merit system based on immigration. That means welcoming the best and brightest, but banning and deporting gang members, identity fraudsters, drunk drivers, and child abusers.
Democrats maintain they were willing to agree to key elements of Trump's demands on immigration, but that the president backed out of a deal, sparking a short-lived government shutdown earlier this month. Trump, meanwhile, has accused Democrats of using recipients of deferred action for childhood arrivals as pawns for partisan advantage. Democrats say they simply want the Republican-led Congress to act.
If a vote came up on DACA, on protection for these dreamers, for these young people, it would pass overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate. But the Republicans refused to even give us a vote.
The White House is releasing its immigration reform blueprint as lawmakers of both parties race against the clock to strike a deal before U.S. government funding expires once again on February 8th. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Why were white roses trending at the Grammys? We'll explain in a moment.
At the African Union Summit in Ethiopia, United Nations officials and African leaders discuss international cooperation and greater UN peacekeeping to protect areas battling extremist violence. In Uganda, tabloid Red Pepper returns to the stands after President Yoweri Museveni's pardon of 8 editors and writers charged with treason and defaming the president ends a 2-month hold on circulation. South Africa protests against water shutoff erupt in Cape Town after residents ordered to use just 87 liters a day. In Madagascar, nuns serve those suffering from leprosy. On World Leprosy Day, Madagascar sees 2,000 cases a year.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Welcome back to Africa 54. And here's what's trending. What's up with White Roses? The 60th annual Grammy Awards in New York Sunday. A number of artists, producers, and executives opted to accent their red carpet looks with a white rose after a last-minute push by behind-the-scenes music industry professionals to come up with a gesture of unity for this #MeToo moment. The group Voices in Entertainment launched an email campaign to spread the word about the accessory of choice. The white rose, the group says, has historically stood for hope, peace, sympathy, and resistance. Next up, beef burgers, sausage and mash, and fish and chips are off the menu at one London pub. The blacksmith and the toffee maker in North London has made an unusual switch to a fully vegan food menu. But rather than seeing customers flee, its management says food sales have tripled. The pub's vegan switch is part of a broader global trend towards vegetarian and vegan lifestyles, particularly in developed markets. The pub's menu still boasts classics such as a burger and chips instead made from seitan, often referred to as wheat meat. There is also a green mac and cheese grilled sandwich and polenta fries. Well, and finally, models in brightly colored pantsuits and ankle-length dresses graced a Paris catwalk in what organizers say was the city's first show of modest fashion that highlights styles popular with Muslim women. Organizers say modest fashion had met resistance in France because of its religious associations, but there was demand for the styles in the country and beyond. Spending by Muslims on clothing and apparel is projected to reach $368 billion by 2021. That's according to the 2017 Reuters State of the Global Islamic Economy report. And that's what's trending today. That's our show. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When you slip, you fall down. But how does something slip from your mind?
Slip one's mind.
Let's listen to Anna and Jonathan.
Look at this beautiful cake I made for the dinner party.
Oh no, is that tonight?
Yes. Didn't you make something?
No, it totally slipped